Yes, Toon family, what a huge win for you guys today. A really tough game. One in which you had to show a bit of defensive stability, but also had to go forward and create opportunities through a very stubborn Fulham shape. But you got the job done in the end, and I think you are deserved winners on the basis of the game. As per usual, we'll be talking about it, seeing what went well, what could have been improved, and all of that lovely stuff. But before I do begin, if you enjoyed the video, of course, please do hit the like, hit the subscribe, and describe that game in one word in the comment section down below. I'll be very interested to see. Mine is roller coaster. I think it has to be that. I feel like there were certain parts in the game where you can see Newcastle United's dominance. I think that first 10 to 15 minutes was phenomenal. You know, Voltemada had that opportunity from the Trippier free kick. I was already sort of celebrating that he had scored that. I thought, you know what, that's Voltemada in that position, he's going to score. But I think it was an unlucky sort of effort, the way it went. You know, another day he scores that. It's pretty much as simple as that. Murphy hitting the bar as well. There were so many opportunities. You just felt Newcastle, if they kept plugging away, they would eventually score. And this is where I've got a little bit in terms of criticism, really. I don't think it's that, but Newcastle United, they go through that first 15 minutes and it feels like there's a massive lull in the game between the 15th and the 30th minute. I just feel like that is a common theme with them at the minute. I feel like they go really hard, and if they haven't got that goal in the first 15 minutes, things don't sort of go to plan. The opposition starts to get into it, but that's football at the end of the day. I feel like you can't contain an opposition team for a full half or full 90 minutes unless you're Arsenal. I feel like they're the only team at the minute that can show pure dominance from 1 to 90 minutes. But even then, there's 5 minutes for the opposition in those games that they're involved in. But I feel as though Eddie Howe has got to find a way in which potentially, instead of letting the opposition get into it, can you just keep the ball for around 10 minutes after that first 15 minutes of rush power and trying to get that first goal. But at the end of the day, he is the manager. I'm sure he understands that these phases happen, and it's probably one of just a containing job for Newcastle United. But let's go on to the goal. I think it was a wonderful finish from Jacob Murphy, a mistake from Bassi, but you've got to be there, you've got to be in the press. And Jacob Murphy was there. I feel like he's such a good player. He's such a hard worker. The way he's just so persistent. He's always trying to make things happen. And that's why I enjoy Jacob Murphy. You know, it's just when he gets that ball onto his right foot and he either drills it across the goal or drills it towards goal. It's just an exciting thing. You know, you don't see many wingers with the ability of Jacob Murphy to just go on the outside and put a delivery of quality into the box or a shot of quality towards goal. And I feel as though these sort of players can be so impactful in the modern game. You know, we're so sort of used to inverted wingers coming off their left foot, bending one. But players like Jacob Murphy are just as effective. You saw that finish across the goal. If he was left-footed, he wouldn't be able to put a finish like that in there. And I feel as though, you know, there's Elanga, there's Barnes, there's so many good players now in those wide areas for Newcastle United. But Jacob Murphy just keeps on showing why he's the one to be able to nail down that right wing spot. So I feel like in that first half, he was really good. He also had the other opportunity where Anthony Gordon put him through. He has to do that better. He's got to score there. But at the end of the day, you know, he scored that first goal. A much trickier chance as well. I feel like the 1v1 versus Leno, it was an easier chance. He had to score that, but like I said, it happens sometimes. You can't be expected to take every single opportunity. But, you know, I feel like if that goes to 2-0, the game is put to bed and what follows wouldn't really happen. And I feel like that first half, there was a lot of mistakes. There wasn't much sustained pressure. You could see the quality in there from Bruno Guimaraes. And I feel like Miley had a really good first half. I already see on social media, and I know the social media fans are not the same as the fans that watch these videos, but they're hammering Miley for some reason. I don't know why, but he, for me, had a really strong first half. Yes, he gave away a little opportunity where there was, you know, a transition for Fulham, but it didn't come to much. And Voltemada did the same. So, you know, you can't really be hammering him. I feel like he's such a young player and he's got so much quality. I saw him breaking up the play. I saw him playing some lovely balls out wide through the middle of the pitch. He's just a player with a lot of quality, and I feel like you've got to give him a bit of time. You know, the games that he's been involved with, Benfica in the week, then he's playing against Fulham on the weekend. It's a quick turnaround, but he showed glimpses of what he's about again in that first half. I think he was really good against Benfica. I did say that in the video in the roundup of that game. I think he's a really good player, Lewis Miley, and I feel as though he's going to keep getting better. He's going to keep improving, and that's going to be huge for Newcastle United. And I feel as though, you know, in terms of the defensive side of things. Dan Burn found it quite tricky up against the Adama Traore, but it's always going to be tricky against those players who are quick. He had moments where he did win that ball back, but I feel as though Lewis Hall needs to come back with speed. I mean, Dan Burn, as wonderfully as he is, I feel as though he's much better suited to the centre-half position. I feel like at left-back, he sort of struggles against those quicker wingers. I think against Saka, he had a really tough day against Arsenal. And I feel as though, again, against Adama Traore, a really tough game. But those are the wingers that are going to make it tough for you. This is the Premier League. I feel like every week you're going to come up against a really tricky winger. Even in the Champions League, Ludo Bacchio, look how good he was coming off with his left foot. So I feel like Dan Burn, return him to centre-half. For now, he's doing a great filling job. He hasn't done a huge error, one where you're like, Dan Burn, what are you doing? But you can see sort of his weaknesses when he's playing in those wider areas. I do feel like Sven Botman had not one of his better games, but you can't really expect him to keep on performing to the levels that, we have been seeing these past weeks. It's really tricky, but he's young. He's going to keep getting better. He came off with a head injury for that goal for Fulham. And I think that's where we're going to now talk about the goal that was scored by Fulham. It was really scruffy in terms of a ball across from Kevin was really good. A lot of quality on it. Then the second ball, the second action, Sven Botman in the air. I really did expect him to head that away, but Lukic got above him. Injury, he's obviously not faking that. That's obviously a really, really bad injury for him in the head, and obviously the substitution had to come in, Shaw had to come on, but a really sloppy-ish goal. But you didn't really expect Newcastle to be conceding goals like that because they've been so strong. But look, you can't defend everything. I think Nick Pope had some wonderful saves in the first half once again. I feel like Fulham had some decent opportunities, not much in the way of crucial chances. I feel like there was a good containing job done. But, at the end of the day, when it goes to 1-1, you're now asking, what's the mentality of Newcastle United? Can you be able to pick yourselves up, go again and get that goal? And I feel as though for the last 25 minutes of that game, it was phenomenal from Newcastle United. That is what I want to be seeing. Many times the opposition 1-1, they were on the other end of it against Brighton last week in terms of they got that equaliser. They had that 5-minute flurry and then things sort of fell apart. But today they were given the opportunity to do the opposite, go and get that goal. And they did. It was really, really good. I'm not going to lie. When Voltemada was taken off, I was like, what are you doing, Eddie Howe? And I feel like this is where the managers earn their money, because a change like that, I would have never done that. I feel like it was one of Voltemada's quieter games, but I still feel like he could have made an impact towards the end of the game. But Will Asula comes on, he's pressing. Elanga comes on, he's pressing. Barnes as well had an impact. You felt his presence on the pitch. Tonali as well in there as well had an unbelievable attempt. I think he almost scored the same goal he did last season from that side of the pitch. But in terms of going again, keeping on fighting to find that goal, the changes were right. The pressing from Asula and Elanga worked. Another mistake from Fulham. Then I'm thinking, Asula, you've got that ball. Why not just play it quickly across? But this is where those footballers, they have the quality to make the right decision. The shot was brilliant. And then Bruno Guimaraes, who is my man of the match, followed up and put it into the back of the net. A phenomenal sort of passage of play, really, in terms of quality from Newcastle United. And I want to give a massive shout out to Malick Thiaw as this video sort of ends. He was phenomenal. In that last 20 minutes especially, he was mopping up everything. I think he's showing levels now as the leader of that Newcastle United defence. The pace, the power, the passing ability. He's carrying the ball as well at times. He was so good today. I mean, Malick Thiaw, what a signing. What a result for Newcastle United. 2 wins on the bounce. Let's keep kicking on, Toon family.